Welcome to the summer series from the IGDN, the Indie Game Developers Network. This is our panel for Crowdfunding 101. I am the moderator for this panel. My name is Crystal Mazur. My pronouns are she, her mix, and I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. We're going to start with Jacob.
Hey, I'm Jacob Wood. I'm the owner of Accessible Games, and my pronouns are he, him.
Awesome. Lynne?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lynne Meyer, and my pronouns are either she or they. And I'm an editor and a writer and a sensitivity consultant.
Awesome. Mari?
Hey, my name is Murdock, and I'm a freelancer in the tabletop gaming industry, mostly doing writing and a little bit of editing. And I'm also a professional dungeon master, and my pronouns are she series.
Awesome. And then Will.
Hey everybody, my name is Will Munn, and my pronouns are he, him, and I run the Adept Icarus game design and publishing studio.
Awesome. So we are a group of creatives that are part of the IGDN, or the Indie Game Developers Network. It is a trade organization that is a non-for-profit. And basically, we all come together as a collective to create games and to give each other support in convention sales, promotions, helping each other out, asking questions, going and uh, doing collective work within the industry. And is there anything else that I'm missing on that? We also have the Diversity Scholarship, as well as the Indie
Mhm.
Groundbreaker Awards too. Forgot about that. So yeah, so I'm going to have everybody kind of introduce themselves and how they got started in the industry. So a little bit of touch point with that. Just briefly, I have been a writer for tabletop role-playing games for about going on 10 years now. And I got started uh, doing a small kids game, and that ended up getting me writing profession or writing gigs and stuff like that. And my very first officially paid project ended up being the PIP system core book, which won an Emmy in 2018. So we're going to go the opposite way of where I'm looking, and we're going to start with Will.
Mhm.
All right. I've been in this industry for a while, probably 7, 8 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. Um, but I've loved RPGs and board games and things like that ever since I was a kid. My first experience with a TTRPG, I was 12, and then I only got to have basically one session. I made a character and we like wandered into a dungeon, and then I never got to touch an RPG again for like 6 years, and I was dying. I really wanted to, really, really bad. So anyway, I've known that this is something I wanted to be involved in for a real long time. But I've been writing. I started out doing some spot writing, consulting sort of writing for games here and there, and then eventually worked on some larger projects. And then, gosh, I thought it seemed so easy. Why don't I just start my own company doing design and publishing? It'll be easy. It's fine. It's not. It's not fine. It's not easy, but it is very rewarding. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
All right, we're going to go with Marty.
So I actually got started right out of college after I'd finished. I went to college very specifically to be a creative writer. I had no ambition to work in the TTRPG space. But Alderac Entertainment Group was holding open writing auditions to join their story team because they were reorganizing over there for their Legend of the Five Rings game. And I submitted a short story that they liked, and they essentially added me to their story team. So I got to write alongside, some of the IP greats like Sean Carmen. And so that was a really fun thing. But from there, I was able to kind of network with a bunch of people in the industry. More specifically, here in Utah, I met Alan Barr, who runs Gallant Night Games, and he introduced me to a lot of people. And since then, I've just kind of been able to branch out, and I've now worked on other IPs like the Expanse RPG and other indie just little projects here and there, and it's been really fun. So my latest crowdfunding, I guess, stint was with the Green Ronin Publishing's latest set of the Expanse RPG books that we just finished the crowdfunding on, and the book is all done and just in, production hell right now. But that was pretty awesome experience, and I absolutely love it. So it's been about, I think, 12 years now since then. So I've been working on all sorts of stuff, in that
Awesome.
space. Mhm.
Awesome. Lynn?
Oh my goodness, let's see. I
Mhm.
I admit to coming to games later in life. Um, I I spent what feels like a whole former life in higher education. I did that. I was administrative, I was an instructor, I did all that, and my academic background is actually in world religions. So I've taught mythology, I've taught world religions, I did all kinds of social justice work as my career kind of branched out. And along the way, I met the man who is now my spouse, and he's been gaming since he was about 8 years old. The D&D Red Box era, that was his thing. He lived through the whole, satanic panic and has wild stories about that. And when he and I started dating, there was a point where he said, I have this hobby and I think you would like it. And I was so nervous because I'm terribly shy. It took all of about 4 game sessions and I was completely hooked. I love this. And before COVID was a thing, we were still gaming in person. We would host games at our place every weekend, and we would typically go for about 12 hours. Like I'd cook,
Yeah.
he'd be the GM. It was great. It was, oh my God. But I never thought I'd be a creative as much as I loved it. And then life changed as it does. And I went on a medical leave from my job. And I was like, what am I going to do with my time? What am I going to do with myself? And in August of 2018, Ashley Warren put out a tweet that ended up
Mhm.
changing my life. She said, I'm thinking about putting together this feminist anthology of, reimagining these frankly very misogynistic monsters from, throughout, let's put it, throughout literature. It's not just any one property, right? And I said, I have to do this. Now, bear in mind, I had never read a module. I had never played fifth edition. And I said, I still have to do this. And apparently I was the first person to pitch a story to her, an adventure to her. That became Uncaged Anthology. And
Wow.
that became this whirlwind that blew my mind and opened up just so many doors. So from the day that launched, that published in 2019, uh, until 2023, when I became a full-time editor at Paizo, feels like something that I could not have imagined for myself. But I picked up a few awards. There were, any nominated projects. I did not know that this would be the life that I would lead, but I am so happy that this is the life that I have now. I've gotten to do some work with, obviously Paizo, but, Hit Point Press and my friend Will here. I got to do some work for Will and just Cubicle 7 and just all these other great things. Um, and it feels incredible, uh, and such a privilege to be here. And when I can pay forward my expertise in, mythology and culture, it's a nice little bonus. So I also try to make sure that the games that I create as a freelance writer, they have a lot of witchy themes, they have a lot of feminist themes, they're very inclusive by design. So that's part of how I continue the work from my former life. So
Nice.
Nice.
yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Gosh.
All right, Jacob, your turn.
Yeah, thank you. So like Will, I started playing tabletop RPGs like when I was 12, but after one maybe 2 or 3 game sessions. That was the end of a campaign, and then I didn't touch them again for many years. But as my vision started getting worse and worse, I have a degenerative eye disease. I wasn't able to play video games anymore, so I turned back to role playing. And over the years, I've realized that there just weren't a lot of resources for blind gamers such as myself. So I decided to change that. And in 2010, I started Accessible Games to review board games with kind of a lens on accessibility. And it became very evident to me that there just wasn't a lot of focus or resources. And so I decided to start making my own games and learning how to do the publishing aspect of it so I can teach other people how to do the same thing. And by 2012, I ran my first Kickstarter campaign for a game called Cypunk, which was released in 2013. Hard to believe that it was 12 years ago this month that that came out. Um, and since then, I've learned how to create games that are much more accessible from both a game mechanic and from an access perspective, from like the digital PDFs and such. Um, and I've run now, I think, 6 successful crowdfunding campaigns and one highly unsuccessful campaign, which taught me a lot about how to do it right the next time. Um, so that's kind of me in a nutshell. My goal is to uh, bring tabletop gaming to everybody because I do feel like um, maybe not every game is for every person, but I think every person has the right game out there for them. And if all of the publishers out there knew how to get their games more accessible, then they can open that up to the audience of people who may have otherwise not been able to find them.
That's awesome.
Awesome. All right. And that kind of leads really well into one of our first topics, which is that uh, I don't know if anyone who's never crowdfunded actually thinks about the bigger picture of crowdfunding. And so I kind of want to talk about some of the pros and cons of crowdfunding and like why someone would choose to go crowdfunding versus a different pathway. And so I would actually like to start with Mari first. And
Sure.
have you have you start kick us off with this discussion?
Okay. I think more specifically, I've been involved in Kickstarters as a kind of stretch goal author, right? So if the crowd fund was actually funded and then was able to reach a certain threshold, then I would be brought in usually to be involved to create add-on content. And so something that I've seen, at least from my end for crowdfunding, is it seems like there's a really good kind of opportunity for getting more people involved in a project if you have great ambitions for it. Because I think originally everybody kind of starts with like an idea or a budget, what they hope to achieve, but obviously like we know a lot of really cool people in the industry and we want to work with all of them and we want to give them work and we want to help them create some amazing stuff. And I think crowdfunding absolutely gives opportunities for more people to be involved, and just like more people means more creativity and more awesome stuff to share and produce. And so I feel like crowdfunding absolutely allows a game to go from a basic version to an absolutely incredible version, which is awesome. Not every time, but when it does, it's awesome.
Awesome. Jacob.
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of pros to crowdfunding. The obvious one is that it allows you to try to raise money for a game that may otherwise not be created. It also helps you raise awareness of a game or a campaign idea, and get that in front of people. And we've seen more and more companies turn to crowdfunding really as more of a pre-order system because they feel like the game is going to be funded regardless. Maybe they have a deep enough pockets to really make their campaign shine, but they're testing the market to see what size of their audience actually is. So that's another pro. And then I think the biggest one, to me at least, is to build a community around a game before the game is actually launched. It helps you really hit the ground running when that game is out there and you already have an audience ready to play it.
Awesome. Will, what about you?
I agree with all of that. I think it's interesting. In some ways, I don't know how you launch a new game without crowdfunding today.
Yeah.
However, on the con side, because the market has become much more dense, like Jacob mentioned, I think it's easy for a smaller, newer, someone who hasn't done one before to get lost in the shuffle. And so while at one time I think you could just sort of land on Kickstarter because it was really the only platform at the time, and you could show up with your game and maybe you'd have, 10 paragraphs about it and maybe 3 pictures or something like that. And people would look at it and say, this looks amazing, take my money, right? Today, I think that the opportunity for that style of crowdfunding is vanishing. And so that's maybe a current con, I guess. You really do have to do, I think, a lot more upfront work, and be far more prepared with what you bring to market if you want to be successful.
All right, and Lynn?
Yeah, I would say very much that. Um, it's it's a good way. Crowdfunding is a great way to build the buzz, and also just to see how much do we have to even produce. You know, if you're talking about producing a physical item, and right now we know how I can't even find a word strong enough. Changeable the market is. How do you plan for your costs? You don't want to have a warehouse or an apartment full of material that you can't sell. So it really does help to have an idea for what is the draw of this product? How much should I plan for it? Not that it's going to be an exact, but it can give you at least some direction. But you really do have to do a lot more upfront work, as well as saying, than I think you used to have to do. Looking at some of the Kickstarters and crowdfunders that I've been part of, not everything that I've been part of has funded. And it makes a difference. It's the baseline of what an audience expects is changing.
Hmm.
That crowdfunding page has to have a certain degree of polish, and it has to have information. And I get that, because as a consumer, when I'm buying something, I kind of look for that too. I want to know what my money is going to.
Hmm.
You really do have to have that time and that research and that effort put in to make it stand out, and you're still not guaranteed. um, but it can give you an idea for who your audience is and how big that audience is. And I think that's fantastic. Um, and sometimes it surprises you in really good ways. And I love it when that happens.
I think one of the things that you guys hit on, and I think everyone kind of touched upon this, is actually like getting to know what your audience is wanting is one of the reasons behind crowdfunding. Is there really any other reason for crowdfunding other than actually funding the project, right? Like I've seen I've seen crowdfunders where their all of their stretch goals are community copies and stuff like
Hmm.
that, where that's the only thing that they're adding on to it. They're not adding anything else on, or paying authors and writers and artists more. Um, so like, is there other legitimate goals? How do you feel about certain types of goals like that, where you're not actually adding more product, but you're adding more value to either your writers or the community that you live in or other communities around the country, right? Um, uh, is there a goal? Is there, space for that? And is there a reason behind it? And is that a good thing? I'm gonna start with you, Lynn. Sorry.
I, I would say absolutely. Speaking for myself and the ethics of a lot of the folks that I know and work with and really like doing work with, there are consumers and there are fellow creators out there who will prioritize supporting companies that have really ethical practices. And so if there's a stretch goal that says, you know what, if we hit this benchmark, we're going to pay our writers more, we're going to pay our artists more, we're going to invest in them as the creatives who are making this product possible. There are absolutely people who will say, yeah, that's a company I want to support because we like what they're about. And the same thing with community copies. Gaming is for everybody, but it is not financially something that everybody can swing. These things get expensive. So when you put out community copies, that also says something about the standards and the ethics of a company that you're putting your money towards. And that is I think, an increasing selling point. People want to know, you know, are you somebody that I like to keep supporting? Do our values align? Some people don't care, but there are those who do. And there are creatives who will, even if they're not working on your project, they will sing your praises and they will say, you know what, yeah, I love working with this person. I love working with this company. The goodwill is so important nowadays. Absolutely.
Will, what about you? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think there's definitely room for goals that aren't, funding, creating the thing. And some of the campaigns that I've run have had goals like this, so even some of the types of goals already mentioned. Um, and then some of the campaigns I've run have not had them. And it's interesting to me, depending on who you talk to in the industry, because there is something of a squeeze, right? And I think Lynn alluded to this earlier too, right? Like creating things and getting them produced is getting more expensive, and it's getting harder to do that. And so I
Mhm.
see some people kind of turtling up a little bit, I guess, for lack of a better word, right? They're getting in their shell. They're saying, I'm going to protect my ability to continue making games, and I'm going to like, if we overfund, then I'm going to take that money and I'm going to conserve it, and I'm going to prepare to make whatever the next thing I'm going to make will be. And so I don't fault anyone for that. I think that's a valid business practice and something that you may have to do. And if you don't prepare for the future, then you could find yourself without the ability to make games anymore. And that's a
Mhm.
very scary place to be. But at the same time, providing community copies and offering an opportunity for the community to help pay for community copies is really great, right? Because that doesn't, nobody misses out in that scenario, right? No one's losing. Um, and I think, the same thing is true for offering fair compensation to the people who are working on your projects. If you can't afford to pay them like what you really want to pay them in the initial sort of run of however your compensation structure works, and there's a dozen ways to do it, folks, but if you can't afford to give them upfront the money that you think that they're worth, then having those opportunities to add more through crowdfunding, I think, as long as you do it with some grace and a little bit of you sprinkle it in with giving stuff to people who are backing as well, that then people will be really supportive of that.
Great. Jacob.
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen some goals in the past that were more community oriented. Like if we reach, some number of followers on our social media account, we'll add something to the stretch goal, and that's, a non-financial incentive to get people talking about the game. And that goes back to what I said before about building that community of players before the game actually launches. I think there's a lot of value in growing outward as opposed to just upward, which is kind of how I see that.
Awesome. And then Mari?
Mine is kind of more of a byproduct of what I see happening because of crowdfunding. And this is almost just certainly from a consumer standpoint, like something that I've noticed is by following and backing a lot of, crowdfunding projects, is that I've learned a lot about what it takes to actually get a game produced, right? Like what kind
Yeah.
of timeline do you have? What kind of operational problems come your way? Cost for not just writers, but artists and actual like product and stuff like that. And I feel like crowdfunding kind of allows a lot of indie producers to like kind of let the consumers see, like what's behind the curtain, like what are you actually
Mhm.
paying for? Because I do remember talking to some of, other game creators who were lamenting the fact that a lot of their consumers say that they're mad that their game costs $8, right? Like they get people all the time saying like, oh, it's so expensive. Why would I pay more than $2 for this? But like something that, we do often in crowdfunding is we share them like in real time updates of like where the product is, like what system we're kind of working with in the moment to like make this happen. And
Mhm.
so I think it gives a lot of maybe like a reality check to the industry and those involved to like show them like this is why we ask for this type of money, because lots of people are working on a lot of different parts to this. And so like we do need to cover those costs. And so that's why I do love those projects that do say like we want to give our creatives, and all of the producers more money or a bigger cut of the final pie, because everyone's working overtime to bring this to you and in so many different ways. And so I think that that's kind of a really excellent thing to bring to the table, to bring to the conversation of like, hey, we're not trying to scam you to buy our game. Like we love it and we absolutely are working our butts off to bring this to you. So like that's what it is.
Yeah. Um,
Can I just, oh,
oh
sorry.
yeah, go ahead. Go
Can I
ahead,
just add
Jacob.
to
Nope.
that briefly? There's a lot that goes into the cost of producing a game that isn't just paying the authors and the illustrators and
Mm,
such. There's all of your fulfillment and shipping. If you're hosting on something like Drive-Thru, they take a 35% to 40% cut depending on your agreement with them. So there's so many reasons that games have to be priced a certain way, and crowdfunding is a great way to break into that and get rid of some of those upfront flat fees that you end up having to pay out to people in order to even start breaking even. And I think, to your point, having the ability to share that information with your backers and be really transparent is another great aspect of crowdfunding. Again, you get to pull back the curtain and say, this is the reality of what it takes to make a game.
mhm.
And I think that's really helpful for people to be able to see.
I've been a part of several Kickstarters as stretch goals, where the upfront cost and everything was broken down in the synopsis for the crowdfunder. And I feel like while that may not have been what drew everybody, everybody knew where that money was going. And I
Mhm.
feel like they were probably more likely to back it than not. And so this kind of perfectly leads into the next question, which is that I have back Kickstarters and stuff that have not funded, right? And I've been disappointed because the thing that I really wanted didn't quite happen. So, what are some things that work and what are some things that don't? And then what are some mistakes that you either have done and they've come back to not end so well for you, or that you have seen happen and that you're like, oh, I know I will never do that. Let's see. Who have I not started with yet? Mari, I have not started with you. So you are first.
Okay. This is more from a writing perspective. I personally have never like launched a game, and so I don't know too much about that process. But one mistake that I made as a writer being involved in a crowdfunding project was I signed a work agreement with a company that had full intentions to, launch a crowdfunding project. And my contract was contingent on number one, obviously the thing getting like funded. And so they said, once it's funded, you'll get paid. But what ended up happening was that that company didn't even crowdfund at all. They had a campaign plan, and I had full, faith that this obviously would go through, and it didn't even make it to the table. And I felt really kind of stupid as a young writer, thinking like, oh, why did I sign that contract? Because I did all the work. I'm never going to get paid for that. And so even though I still hold those people in high regard as my friends in the industry and I wish them well in all their projects, I know that I just made a mistake. I put a ton of work and effort into it. project that just never got off the ground. And so I now know after that mistake going forward, I was very careful about who I was working with in the future, very specifically seeing whether or not I was, going to be paid regardless of, the crowdfunding outcome. Is it kind of became a priority for me as a writer just because I did mess up in the beginning, and that was totally my fault as a naive, young person hoping to produce something. And I guess I really chalk it up to like experience. I'm like, I gained a lot of experience from that. And so I still find that a good memory for me. But I would definitely warn other producers out there, like read your work agreements and be careful about that. Because that is an obvious consequence that I didn't even think about.
Yeah. Jacob.
Yeah, there were a couple of things that I've thought of. Try to keep it kind of succinct. Um, there isn't like one silver bullet that I found that's supremely helpful. I've tried many different approaches to many different things, and a lot of it I think really boils down to building up a community and some hype before you even launch. I ran some like early bird pricing on some things, hoping that that would spark some interest, but I didn't have enough of a community backing Monster Cart Mayhem initially for anybody to see that campaign early enough to get those and take advantage of them. So they ended up not really being that effective as a marketing tool. Um, so what I would say as the most effective thing, and this is actually what I also learned from my failed campaign on survival of the able, was to have a community behind you, not just of people who are interested in supporting your work, but also collaborators who want to work on it with you. So when I launched Survival of the Able the first time, I was going about it 100% on my own, and I think I only ended up bringing in like 23% of my funding goal. It was nothing. Um, and I ended up canceling that campaign and going back a year later, where I had established a connection with Todd Crapper, who is an amazing collaborator. And we really worked to polish up the campaign. We leveraged each other's networks. We leveraged both of our creativity. And then by the time we relaunched Survival of the Able, we ended up being well over like 128% funded or something. And that was all thanks to having a community of people to work with, not just to be hyped about the game. And I think that is the number one piece of advice that I could give to any creator is to not work in your own little bubble. Don't protect your IP. Don't feel like, if you let it out before you're ready, then somebody's going to steal your idea. It's really have a team and work together as a team, and you'll go a lot further.
All right. Will.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of those viewpoints. I think, you have to protect yourself, got to make sure you're being cautious. Also, any reach multipliers that you can create for your project in advance is going to be super valuable. I've run three successful crowdfunding campaigns on Kickstarter. The first one did miles better than we ever expected it would do, and I think part of that is it's a fun game and people like it, sure, whatever, right? But the I think one really big part of that was the fact that we involved it was actually more than 24. Originally, it was supposed to be 24 stretch goal authors that were all going to work on different pieces, and it ended up being more than that because it was just so successful. Um, so so involving other people, I think, like Jacob said, is really crucial. I think especially when you're early on. The second project that I crowdfunded had very few contributors, but it had one very well-known contributor in Alan Barr. And so that was, I think, successful in spite of, the lack of reach that maybe I have, right? But because of his reach, it was very successful. And then I ran one more crowdfunder after that, where I used about the same amount of collaborators and marketing as I used for that last project with Alan, and brought in about half as much funding because it just, it's still successful, but we were doing some experimentation trying to figure out like where's the sweet spot? Can we can we still have a successful campaign without a lot of, additional contributors and things? And frankly, I mean, it really depends on what you're going to do. I've seen huge campaigns with tons of really talented people working on them that didn't fund. So that's not the only secret. There isn't a silver bullet, like Jacob said, right? I mean, there are so many things that you can do. You can get out there and get on podcasts. You can be on panels. You can, you know, um, go and run your game at conventions and get it in front of as many people as you can. Build up an email list, send it all out to people. Say, hey, come see my thing, right? And none of that guarantees you success. You still have to make something that people are interested in. And so, I mean, if you make this is a really bad example because there's an awesome board game that's kind of like this. If you make a button collecting RPG, it might not do really well, right? But if you've done your due diligence and you've played with playtesters and everybody loves what you're doing, then maybe you've got something on your hands that you want to bring to crowdfunding, and maybe it'll be really successful.
Yeah. Lynn?
I echo everything that my colleagues have said. And it's interesting because, I've been a part of working on projects that have been crowdfunded, and the folks running the crowdfunding never bothered to tell me, oh, hey, it's finally launching, right? Like I had to find out accidentally, like, oh, hey, this thing that I worked on and I would happily hype is actually live now. Um, and when you're writers, when you're editors, when you're artists, when they've turned in the work to you and you're ready to launch, they're still part of your community, and you can tap into, presumably if they had a good time working with you, they're going to want to shout about it from the rooftops. Hey, I did this thing. I mean, I love talking about, hey, I wrote for this cool project. So you will amplify your reach if you stay in touch with your creative team, whoever is on that team and however many people it is. Let them hype you. And that goes along with, be a professional and learn how to work with people. I hate to have to specify it, but some people don't know how to maintain professional relationships. It's not a given. Um, treat your team like the professionals they are. I don't care if they're full-time in the industry, if they're freelancers. Everybody deserves respect, and contracts matter. Keep your word, be truthful, be transparent. Um, that goes a long way. That goes a very long way. And also, I would say, as far as mistakes that I've seen, and it seems like it's going to be more so now because of all the uncertainty with the trade situation, is everybody wants to offer really cool stuff. Everybody wants to have the really cool stretch goals, but you have to have a plan for fulfilling those. You have to know what your capacity is. You have to know, what is it going to cost? Do I have a place to store this material? If you've got, 20 stretch goals and you can't actually fulfill those, you're going to have really disappointed customers who will probably not back your next one, because they'll see that you just don't think through your campaign. And I will say that sometimes, delays happen with production. Life is a lot, especially right now. And as far as keeping that goodwill and keeping communication also with your audience is important. So maybe you do have a production delay. Maybe everything is great on your side, but something happened at the production facility, or your printer proofs came back with mistakes, things that are outside of your control. You know what? Communicate with your audience and let them know what's going on so they don't feel like you've forgotten about them. That goes a long way as well, because what you really don't want is people backing your campaign, you fund, and then you get a lot of cancellations.
Yep.
Mhm.
Maybe even, sorry, just to chime in, one thing
Yeah.
to add to that, because I think we all said things like, "Oh yeah, you might not fund if you don't do these things," and Lynn kind of alluded to the other side of that, which is you could way overfund and still epically fail, right?
Mhm.
And we've all, like, if you've backed crowdfunding campaigns, very many of them, if you've backed like 50 or 100 of them over the years, you undoubtedly have run into some of these, right? Super
Mhm.
successful, incredible crowdfunding campaign, still waiting for whatever it is they were supposed to produce for you, right? So that's that's a huge risk.
But I think what Lynn said was really key was keeping communication open because I was speaking with someone at a mini kind of gaming conference recently, and he said that he's been waiting for 5 years for a game. And I was like, "Oh, aren't you mad about that?" And he said, "No, because he trusts the producers, he trusts the game creator, he
Hmm.
believes in the product, he can't wait to get it. He's disappointed, obviously, that the delay has been so long, but he's like, I really like this and I can't wait till it comes in the mail." And so a part of that was because he was kept in the loop and he really thought like, hey, I understand their situation, totally willing to go along with it, totally willing to be patient. And that's because he knew what was happening. And on the opposite side, right, if they don't know what's happening, there's nothing more infuriating than like just feeling like Will kind of said, like forgotten about or maybe even disrespected because you gave them your money and then you don't hear
Mhm.
anything like that. That's really an awful feeling.
I'm going to speak from like someone who backs Kickstarters and have also worked on Kickstarters. One of the um uh best Kickstarter stories that I have is that I found an RPG game that the art was absolutely amazing. It blew me away. It was something that I had never really seen before in a RPG project, and I backed it. And then I met the people at PAX Unplugged, and I was a writer at the time, and I was talking to them about their Kickstarter, which was still going on, and I was like, "Oh my God, the art for this book is amazing." They had actual plays, which also really help if you have a new game system. Do
Mhm.
your actual plays during the crowdfunder because that helps so much. Um, and they were like, "Well, do you want to be a stretch goal on it?" And I was like, yeah, I would love to be a stretch goal on it." And it ended up, it was Never Going Home, which the entire game line has the same artist, who is amazing, by the way. But the art was what caught me originally, and I would have backed the project one way or another, whether I was a writer on it or not, because of the art. And Will, you worked on that one too.
I backed it. I didn't work
Oh,
on
you
it.
backed
No.
it. Oh,
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
you back worked on it. Um, but yeah, like the books are absolutely amazing, and it was awesome and to get to work on the project that I fell in love with the art with. So, like, make crowdfunding and stuff like that, you also have to catch people's attention in some way. It may not necessarily be art, right? It may be design or your video or how you're marketing it or the actual plays that come out of that. But you have to find some sort of hook, right? And that's
Mhm.
kind of where all of this is kind of leading, is that you need to find something to hook people. Okay. So now that we've kind of talked about all of that, we're going to be a little bit more picky now, and we're going to talk about platforms because for the longest time, Kickstarter was it, right? And now we have a whole bunch of other platforms. So I'm going to put this as two parts because there's the crowdfunding aspect and there's also the not crowdfunding aspect of other things that you can do other than crowdfunding. So I'm going to kind of split this one is to the what platforms do you like or that have been successful or things that you have seen that have been successful, and then what non-crowdfunding platforms that you have seen that have been successful. Because I feel like having that discussion too is also kind of important. And I'm actually going to open this up as who would like to go first with this one? Is anyone? No?
I'll
I've got a
admit that
few.
I don't have a lot to say about this, so I'm gonna let other people kind of answer.
That's fine.
I've got a few ideas. I can go.
Yeah, yeah, go right
Um,
ahead.
Obviously, Kickstarter is the 800-pound gorilla of crowdfunding, but just because it's the biggest and probably the most well known on the market doesn't mean it's the only option for people, especially nowadays. Back in 2012, 2013, there was also Indiegogo, which very few companies had a lot of success with. Even Third Eye Games, who had some wildly successful Kickstarters at the time, I remember them running a Indiegogo campaign that wasn't nearly as successful. So there's a lot to be said about the platform that you choose. Nowadays, you have things like BackerKit and Crowdfunder that also have some big audiences, and people, I think, were willing to give them a chance when Kickstarter made some missteps a couple of years ago, and that has bought them uh, some leeway, I think. Um, but for my part, anyway, Kickstarter isn't very accessible for disabled content creators, but crowdfunders even worse. And so there's a lot to be said about choosing your platform from what actually works for you as well. Um, but outside of those like big kind of meet your goal kind of campaign software like Kickstarter and Crowdfunder, you also have your Patreons and your itch.io, Ko-Fi. These are all ways to get an audience to back your work without there being a major campaign of sorts. And I think those are really useful for certain types of projects. I know that there were some campaigns on itch.io where people were just saying, buy my product as a beta, and when I reach enough income from it, then I'll be able to have the money um, to publish it properly. And I think Bones Deep by Technical Grimoire was one of those campaigns, and that worked for them. And it meant that they didn't have to do that like 30 to 60-day grind of launching a Kickstarter campaign because for some people, it's really challenging. You have to become a project manager overnight, and if you're not ready for that, I can't even begin to prepare you for the amount of work that it is to run a campaign on Kickstarter. But if you can do it a little bit more over time, like through Itch or Ko-Fi, then those are options that let you kind of build up some slow momentum and can help you produce a product that might not be as big or flashy or polished because your funding amounts aren't going to be quite as big as you can find on Kickstarter. But they'll let you do that creative thing that you've wanted to do all of your life, and still have the financial backing to do it.
Yeah. Anyone else want to add on?
Um, Maybe a couple thoughts. I think
Yeah.
uh, there's one more that I've seen some campaigns on. I think it's a little more geared toward board gaming, but GameFound is another
Oh, yeah.
common crowdfunding platform. I've seen a lot of really big campaigns there and on BackerKit, like from, you know, AAA type, you know, companies and stuff that are, have staff and they're making really big things. And I think those can be successful there. Um, I still see a better community in some ways around Kickstarter just because of how it notifies you when people that you're following are have launched a campaign or that your friend backed something or things like that. They're just a little bit better in that way, and that's why I still use Kickstarter. But like many people, also I understand it. I've used it a few times. I know how it works, so it's kind of easy for me. And I've heard, and I almost set up a campaign in Crowdfunder, but it was, I saw like campaigns that I felt like should have earned two or three times as much as they did in Crowdfunder if they had been on another platform. So I decided not to do it, even though I wanted to. I might still take something there because I think it is never a good idea to put all of your eggs in one big company's basket, right? Like,
Mhm.
and the same thing is true for, like Drive-Through RPG, I think was mentioned earlier, and Itch, right? Having those platforms is the only place where you sell games is not a great idea. Like, have your own platform if you can, get it on other types of stores, get it into to local game stores if you can. Like there's a lot of different options out there, and I think if you, I mean, you see these big platforms and they're always looking for more ways to keep people locked in and bring more stuff to their platform so they can get their 30% or whatever it is that they earn. And they're incentivized to do that. And it makes sense. But if they one day turn around and change their policy and say, yeah, you know what, if you're going to be here, actually, we're going to charge you 45%. And maybe that was your whole profit margin, right? So
Mhm.
you got to be prepared for changes like that. The the nature of, oh boy, I'm not going to get political. The nature of the way that society works, right, is just that you have to be prepared for things like that. Otherwise, you can get sunk by a company really easily.
Yeah. Uh, Mary or Lynn, do you guys have anything to add on?
Just that, you know what your product needs and know what
Hmm.
your own I don't want to say comfort level, but know what works for you. Um, and so a friend of mine actually has one particular game that started life on Itch as a digital only product, and with art that they could afford, which that's how it works. You find things in the public domain, what have you, and that became one of their more popular offerings. So they did eventually launch it on Crowdfunder, and Crowdfunder worked for them over Kickstarter because it has a different fee structure. So they didn't have to worry about that. And they were successful enough. They had very modest goals, but they were successful enough that enabled them to hire artists to do custom art for the game for the first time and create print versions, which they could then get into some of their local stores. So for them, the crowdfunder was one step in many in getting their work out there that worked for them. It wasn't the kind of project that Kickstarter would have necessarily been appropriate for many different reasons. And I thought that was just so brilliant, because people are like, oh, I have this as it exists, but now it's got an upgraded version. It's been expanded a little bit. This is nice. You're still giving them something a little bit different if they already were part of your audience. But it's not your whole thing. Um, so just, yeah, know your goals, know yourself, know there is no one size fits all. So, but it can
Yeah.
work.
Did you have anything to add, Marty?
Really not on this question.
All right. So now I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about starting off your campaign strong as well as marketing. We're going to kind of combine those two to talk about like how do you get this massive project off the ground? Because let's face it, like crowdfunding itself is a different project than the actual project is,
Mhm.
right? It's a whole different mindset. It's a whole different hat that you have to wear. And so how do you get it going? And what are some marketing tips that you have? So I'm gonna go back to uh calling names, and I am going to start with Lynn. As far as where would you like, what advice do you have for this, or what are your experiences with this?
Oh gosh. Do as much legwork in advance as you can. Really. Um, you know, speaking either as somebody who's seen things behind the scenes or as somebody who has backed campaigns, I want to know that there is a good portion of the product actually, I'll borrow a film phrase, but in the can already,
Hmm.
you know, and I need to see some evidence of that. It helps me have good faith in the project. So don't launch it too soon. Take your time until you're actually ready to launch it, where you will optimize your chance for success. I think rushing is the worst thing you can do. If you even have a hint of a suspicion that maybe you would benefit from, change your date for launch. You should probably do it. Take the time to make your product page look good, uh, get the photos that you need, compile the information that you need. If you have the resources to do I don't know, snazzy little advertising video that you can embed in the page, do it. I think the more that you invest up front, before you actually hit launch, the more you will have success. Because I have seen some folks who have just been so eager to get it out there. They just weren't ready. Um, Mock-ups are fine depending on the platform. There may be rules against it. But the more that you can tell me or give evidence that you've already gotten it done, it's in process, it's something tangible and not just a pipe dream, the better you're going to be.
Yeah. Will, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And careful with the stretch goals too, because that can burn you, right? If you get too ambitious with those.
Mhm.
I mean, speaking as someone who had a stretch goal in process for 2 years, yeah, it's hard. So I think anything you can do to be prepared, like, and there are lots of inexpensive things you can do. You don't have to do all of the expensive stuff up front, right? You don't have to get print proofs of everything. If you can, then sure, do it, right? You don't have to order all the art beforehand. That's a huge expense, right? Um, but play test it, right? I mean, take it to conventions that are local to you, take it to meetup groups or friendly local game stores that are local to you and offer to run it for people and get their thoughts and feedback on it so that you're not doing this hamster wheel of, oh my gosh, I don't know what's in the final product yet, right? If you can know what's in it, then that's very, very good and helpful. Um, and as much as you can have done beforehand as possible is really great.
Mhm.
Um, 2 out of 3 campaigns that I've run, we have had a layout of at least one book completely done before we ran the campaign. So it was ready and we could like share things with people and that was really good and helpful. Um, I mean, actual plays are really great. You brought those up, Crystal, and I think that's a really good place to be as well. Like doing actual plays either just in the month running up to the campaign or during it can be really good. It can be a lot to do that while you're trying to project manage a huge
Mhm.
crowdfunding campaign. Having done it a couple of times, it can be done. It is a little stressful, but doing it during can definitely help. And doing it in the run up, I think, can be really, really great. Yeah.
Yeah. Marty.
Something that I've noticed just as on the consumer end is that a couple of the things that I've backed on Kickstarter and some other crowdfunding sites is that they'll do like a pre-launch like
Mhm.
campaign essentially. Like they'll ask people to like click the notify me on Kickstarter when this does launch sort of
Hmm.
campaign first initially, or they'll ask people like, hey, why don't you pledge just $1 to reserve your copy of whatever, right? And so they're just kind of testing the waters almost to see like what this campaign may look like before they actually, start actually running it out there. And so something that I've just noticed, like I said, just as a consumer of that, like what that does is I think it maybe allows creators to like measure how much of a market reach that they have before they actually launch. So they maybe can temper their expectations for what the launch will actually look like. Um, and personally, just as a consumer, I feel like that's also really interesting because if I pay $1 for a game that I'm excited about, because they don't have the full campaign yet. They've only showed me one piece of art and they've given me the pitch. And I'm like, I like that. And I pay $1. I already feel invested, right? So by the time that the campaign rolls around, I'm already on board. Like they already got
Mhm.
me in. They already have their, I've already shown that I'm invested and I'm much more willing to back it. Even if it's maybe more expensive than I initially thought, I can think like, hey, they already got my money. I'm already in their pocket. I don't mind at all, So I feel like that was an interesting strategy that I'm seeing more and more of these days.
I do like the $1 backer kit thing or backer level to unlock like the backer kit later
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
sometimes you're in between jobs, right? And $1 isn't going to hit you super hard. It might be devastating for some people. I'm not going to discount like but like some people may be able to swing that and then later purchase on the back end when they have more stable income or are able to save up for more stuff.
Hmm.
And so I love having that option. Um, Even if I don't use it, it's a great option for people.
Mhm.
Jacob.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that real quick, I just recently backed a campaign for like $1 because I was out of work and I wanted to show my support and also like get those product updates. So absolutely the $1 funding level is a wonderful tool. But as for my advice, I think the moment you have gotten your creative idea to a point where you think, I think I can kickstart this, or I think I can crowdfund this, start talking about your campaign to other people. Not necessarily not the campaign, I'm sorry. Start talking about the game. Design in public, show people what you're up to, release beta versions or alpha versions even. Don't be afraid to start getting people interested and excited and teasing them with content ahead of time. You know, I think, Will, you mentioned going to conventions and doing that, plus some actual plays that we've also mentioned. All of those things are really great ways to start building hype around your game because there's nothing you can do that beats having a bunch of people show up on day one to pledge for this new game that they've been excited about for several months now. And to Mari's point, taking advantage of that Kickstarter pre-launch page is a really great way to make sure people are being notified the day that your campaign goes live. So again, even if you ultimately don't end up crowdfunding your game, uh, nobody's necessarily going to think worse of you for sharing with them some of your ideas that ended up not going anywhere. Maybe you got to a point where you realized that there just wasn't enough hype around your game or your idea, and you decide to not crowdfund it. But that's also really good information because it means you didn't
Hmm.
sink all of your time and effort and investment into a product that just doesn't have any staying power. I've had plenty of ideas that I've talked about publicly on my blog, and I'm like, I'm thinking about doing this, and I've developed it for a little while, and then there just doesn't seem to be as much interest from the community, and I eventually uh, decided not to go in that direction. And I think that is just as valuable as catching people's attention and building up that campaign hype ahead of time.
Absolutely. Yeah, Lynn.
Just a thought because, um, as creatives, we have a small community and
Yeah.
not everybody, and I say this as somebody who's neurodivergent myself, it's not always easy to put ourselves out there and to
Hmm.
be visible, but don't only be visible when you're marketing something,
Hmm.
you know, um, get to know people and don't treat it like, oh, now I'm networking, really, if you invest in other people, they're going to be more likely to invest in you. And consumers are going to see you and be like, oh, I kind of really like what this person has to say. I like what they're doing. Maybe I should check out their games, right? It's it's not a matter of just, I have this great idea and I'll pop up out of nowhere and the community will support me. I mean, that's very rare. It can happen, but it's very rare. You do have to participate in the industry, even if it's not really comfortable for you. Find a way to do it. Find whatever works for you. Maybe you do have a blog. Maybe you do actual plays. But you're part of a really cool industry, get to know people and let them get to know you. And you'll be surprised, even if one idea doesn't hit, maybe you're talking to somebody and another idea is born and that becomes the big thing, don't discount that. Relationships matter, and genuine relationships. I can directly say that the reason I'm fortunate to do what I'm doing now is because of friends that I made during the earliest days of Uncaged Anthology. This was not a goal of mine. I didn't know I wanted to or could even possibly work in this industry full time. The friendships happened organically, and I would support other folks, and then in turn they were like, hey, you know what, I think you're a great fit for this thing. um so that's sort of the hidden behind the scenes thing, really. You have to invest that time ever before you even bring something to a crowdfunder. It's people.
I think Lynn too, you brought up earlier, making sure you tell your creatives that are working on the project when it actually launches. Because I have been a part of several Kickstarters where I wasn't told until like 2 weeks into the campaign or like a week before it ends. And I was like, wait, you didn't have like a pre-thing where I could like follow even? Or like I didn't even know that this was going. I would have been putting it out on social media. So like if you are in charge of that or you are part of like the team that is in charge of that, make sure that you're reaching out to your creatives. Because you guys have, your resources, but everybody that worked on the project also has theirs. And that's part of networking. And we've brought that up a couple of times with the whole networking thing. This is also a part of networking, is working with the people that you create to get the word out that this exists, because they will have reach in areas that you may not be a part of. Like, yes, I am a writer, I am a TTRPG, creator. I'm also an educator. And I reach out into teacher spaces very often, especially with games that are targeted towards kids or education or can be used as such. And so I enjoy using my networking and the people that I have connected with to help other people be successful. And I feel like that can often be overlooked. So like that's all been interconnected within all of this. So um okay, we're gonna move on to our last topic. And before we wrap up with everything, and then that is what happens after the campaign. And um like when I back a project, I'm expecting it to not be fulfilled within like a year, right? I'm expecting it to be like a year plus because I know what it takes to go into production of a book. I've seen it. I've been on the back end of things. I know how long it takes. However, I've also been pleasantly surprised where one of our members, Jess, had Oops All Draculas, and I think she fulfilled it in like 3 months. Like
Mhm.
not even like as soon as that campaign was over, she's like, "Give me your email," and I had it in my hands, and I was like, "That was the quickest turnaround ever." And so, um, like how do you prepare for after the campaign? Because there's so much that goes into it. And so I'm going to have let's have Will start with this one.
Ooh, okay. Um, I think there's a lot you can do, and we touched on a bunch of this, right? Which is just being prepared up front, right? As much as you can be prepared for after the campaign, before the campaign is over, or maybe even during it. Like if you're a few days in and you've reached your funding goal, if you got really lucky, or maybe you've got enough funding that you're fairly sure you will fund like by the end of the campaign, then you can start on those things. You don't have to wait, right? There's a lot of things that can be done without writing checks to people, right? And so you can go to your printer and you can start like ordering proofs or things like that once you get to that point. I think additionally, if you have had a lot of luck with unlocking a bunch of stretch goals and the work for those isn't completed, you might be able to say, hey, I think it's okay if we start working on these, and I know that we're going to get the crowdfunding platforms at this point aren't going to stiff anybody their money. I haven't seen that happen in a decade or more. So you're going to get the money, that's going to happen. So you can start working on some of those things as well. And so that's, my take is just, kick off as many things as you can, so that you can meet that sort of expectation, that internal expectation of getting it back within a year. Um, and you might put a date, like people put dates on their campaigns of when things will be done, and sometimes it'll be sooner, but I would urge people to, especially for your first one, be cautious. Just,
Hmm.
don't do anything that you know might put you in jeopardy where you're going to be really late for something, because although communication will help and people will probably lend you a little bit of grace as you're a first time crowdfunder, it's better if you don't have to use that.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Mari.
One thing that I really enjoyed as a writer is the crowdfunding. Some of the crowdfunding people that I've worked with were actually really kind and like sent me thank you notes about being part of the campaign that I thought was like
Hmm.
really nice. And I'm going to call out Will on this because he's done that when I worked with him on his projects, and I felt like really taken care of, right? Like I, as a creative who he invited to be part of his campaign, like he was like, I'm thinking about you. I really appreciate what you've done. And it wasn't just like a check in the mail, and it wasn't just like, like a kind of dispersed email. It was like a personal note. And I felt like that was a really just awesome way again to like just reiterate how important relationships are in our community
Hmm.
as an industry. Because our industry really kind of is whatever what we make it, right? And a lot of the time, yes, these professional relationships are really important to maintain as professional relationships, but we also, we're also fans of games, and that kind of makes us friends as well. And so I feel like personally, I feel like that's a really powerful tool. Just gratitude, acknowledgement, saying thank you is an awesome way to just make this process feel a little less bloodless and much more communal based.
Hmm.
Lynn.
I will say this wasn't one that I was a creative for, but a backer for. My husband and I went all in on a certain project that crowdfunded, like everything was unlocked. It was amazing. Oh my gosh. And they had so many physical things that were added on. It was great. But that takes time to fulfill. It takes time to make, it takes time to ship. And it wasn't a US based company. So there was also that. And something that I thought was really cool that they did, because honestly, the window for fulfillment went longer than any of us were expecting. But there were digital rewards, and they did send those along the way. So we didn't have to wait for everything to be ready before we could start enjoying some of the content that we had paid for. And my husband in particular, this is a game that, he's so eager if we can convene the right group to really appreciate it. As soon as he had that PDF in his possession, he was just so excited. He was fired up. He was making plans, and even though it took a while to get the rest of the material, that went a long way, to keep the excitement and the momentum and feel like this is a real thing. It's really going to happen. And I thought that was smart. you didn't need to invest in any shipping costs or any packaging or anything like that. But it was very much a good faith thing that the company did that went a long way.
Yeah. Jacob.
Yeah, so it's all some really great insight. I think what you do after the campaign largely depends on what you were able to accomplish before the campaign. And I know that's kind of nebulous to say, but the more you have produced and ready to go, the shorter your turnaround times are on fulfilling it after the fact. But if you are just starting out and this is maybe your first campaign and you didn't have like an entire book ready to ship, um, then what you need to do is take your estimate for when you think you might be able to deliver and add 6 months. Um, if you fulfill before that, I think Crystal, you said earlier, nobody's going to be shocked or scared or upset that you fulfilled it early,
Mhm.
but they certainly will start to wonder if things start getting really late. So be prepared to over communicate what's happening if you are late on your goals or on your fulfillment, but also really make sure that you get into that project management mindset the moment the campaign ends. It takes usually a couple of weeks before the money hits your bank account, but you need to be communicating with anybody that you're working with about what the next steps are going to look like. You need to start making plans for how that art is going to be commissioned or how you're going to deliver product to the editor, how your print designer or your layout person needs the files to be formatted before you send it to them. I remember with SciPunk, I had no idea what any of this looked like at the time. So I was just writing my manuscript in Microsoft Word like I just always did kind of on my own. Like nobody taught me how to do this. And so when I started working with my layout person for the first time, he said, well, I needed to be in this kind of format because uh, that's how I import it easily into InDesign and can actually work with it. Because if it's in the state that you have it right now, it's going to take me twice as long. So I had to go back and reformat my entire 80,000 plus word manuscript to be worth importing into InDesign. Those are things that you can do uh, during that interim period, or ideally, you'll start working with them ahead of the campaign even closing and say, "Hey, uh, what's the best way for me to deliver this to you?" And even if that's something even more mundane as, well, I prefer Dropbox to OneDrive, um, knowing those ahead of time will help you in the long run. Just being able to coordinate all of the different pieces and all the different people because it is a big task to project manage. And unless you're hiring somebody else to do that for you, then you need to learn as you go. And the more you can do upfront to avoid any little setbacks, the easier it's going to be for you along the way.
And then I'm gonna kind of add on a little bit here as somebody who's been a stretch goal. And that is communication with your stretch goal writers afterwards. For instance, telling them that their stretch goal was met or not met. I've been on both of those, and I've had people who have told me that my stretch goal has been met and that, I'll be able to write, but then not giving me a date of when they wanted to start because I know that money takes forever to hit. So, like, give me a date that you want me to start writing. Like, maybe you don't want me to start writing until you actually have the funds in hand. That's legitimate, but please tell me. And then also just giving me a heads up of, hey, I don't think your stretch goal is going to hit. I'm really sorry about that. Um, which is also legitimate, and that's nothing that the person running the Kickstarter has really any control over at that point. But just giving them a heads up of, hey, I'm not going to need you for this project, or saying, hey, maybe we can fit this in a different project. You know, will you still be willing to go on to a second Kickstarter, and be an earlier stretch goal? Um, you know, just communication in general. Um, I've had great experiences with it, and I've had some not so great where it's kind of frustrating, where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know am I writing this? Am I not writing this? So just being clear on expectations with that, I feel like is a huge benefit. Okay. So before we fully wrap up, does anyone have anything else that they want to add onto this, or anything that you guys want to share or say that we did not cover?
Maybe something I can add. Just I back a lot of Kickstarters and sometimes more
Hmm.
than my budget can allow. And the
Yep.
reason that I do that is
Mhm.
because they catch me on Instagram at like 11:30 at night and I see a piece of art and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to be a part of this
Hmm.
Kickstarter. So I think that, you know, like social media algorithms absolutely can work really well for you because like as a consumer, I have more games than I could ever play in my lifetime,
Yep.
but I love backing them because it is part of just like my chill social media, like be on the internet time.
Yep.
So just letting you know that maybe use those platforms to like work for you because they're already, you know,
Yeah.
marketing all sorts of weird stuff on there. So if you can get part of that algorithm to be in your corner, then that's super great.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Totally cool if we don't. Okay, cool. All right. So we are going to sign off. I'm going to have everybody kind of share where people can find you. If you have a Kickstarter coming up or have one that's currently in, like uh, after closing orders or anything like that, if you want to do that, please feel free to do that. If you want to do social media, totally fine. And we're going to go with how I started everybody, which was with Jacob.
Thank you. Yeah, again, my name is Jacob Wood. I run Accessible Games. I don't have any Kickstarters uh, or crowdfunding campaigns planned anytime soon, but what I will say is if you are interested in crowdfunding, I have laid bare a lot of the mistakes that I've made along the way and tried to help provide insight to people so that they don't make the same ones. And all of that's available on my blog, going way back to probably 2013. So if you go to www.accessiblegames.biz, that's accessiblegames.biz. There's a category called Publisher Advice, and if you just peruse that, um, you'll find all sorts of information from the times that I have successfully and unsuccessfully run campaigns. And feel free to reach out to me if there's anything that you found particularly interesting or helpful, or if you think it's completely outdated and needs to be gotten rid of. I'm happy to hear any feedback.
Huh. Lynn.
Well, I am most active on Bluesky. So if you're over there, come say hello. My name is my handle pretty much everywhere. I keep it very straightforward. So just LYNNE_M_MEYER. I always use my middle initial because there's a surprising number of Lynne Meyers out there. I did not realize that. I have stories I will not share right now. Um, but yeah, I hang out there most of the time. I do not have any of my personal projects coming up. However, if you are a Pathfinder fan, we do have a board game called Pathfinder Quest coming up. And yeah, you can go. We talked about that at PaizoCon, and there is a page where you can go and say, notify me on launch when that's coming up. So I'm personally really excited about that. I think it's going to be a blast. So go find that and then come nerd out with me on Bluesky, and it'll be fun.
All right. Mari.
So our let's see, I guess I'm currently just doing professional dungeon mastering right now. So if you're interested in playing with me, look me up at Dungeon Master Direct. I am planning a couple of games over after summer is over. So if you're interested in that, just check out our page there. We also, let's see, just wrapped up the Green Ronin Publishing's transport edition of the Expanse RPG. But there are late pledges available. So if you're interested in getting a copy of that for that game, it is an awesome one. And my editor for that, Ian Lemke, is amazing. He's creating some really cool books for that. So I would highly recommend getting your copies there. Other than that, you can find me at my website, mightymurdock.com, which is MARIMURDOCK.
Awesome. And then Will.
So I'm so bad at social media, but I do my best. I try and show up. I'm probably more active on Bluesky than anywhere else, but if you want to find where I am active on social media, you can just go to the website. It's adepticarus.com. That's the easiest way to find all the stuff that points to me. And then including our Discord where we have, discussions about the games and things like that. Um, got we have 3 game lines, and a couple more in progress. So continuing to work on that with a lot of really cool people. Been really lucky to work with some awesome people on those things, and when this, I'm not exactly sure when this is going to drop, but it is very possible that we will have the Arium World Building RPG Complete Edition crowdfunding campaign either on pre-launch or on launch at the time that this comes out. And so that's going to be like a big cool box set of Arium books, and I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and so I'm just really excited to be able to get that going. And we've been working hard. The team has been working hard on that so far, and we have to figure out like what are we gonna do for stretch goals and things like that. That's coming up really soon. So yeah,
That's cool. How do you spell Arium?
Arium.
Nice.
Yeah. So right now there's a few books out with that name on them, but this is like the I don't know, the definitive first edition, I guess. So yeah.
All right. And then I'm Crystal Mazur. I am active on almost every social media platform at Body and Soul 152. I also have a website where you can connect with me through for social media and find my writer's CV, which is thegeekypanda.com. So I want to thank everybody for being on this panel and sharing your expertise. It's been awesome being able to talk with everybody, and I hope that those of you that are watching see the value that you're getting with all of this insight and mentorship and everything like that. You can find more information about IGDN at igdnonline.com. We are also going to be at almost every single major convention coming up for the summer. Origins, Gen Con, I know PAX U is coming up. I believe Gamehole Con, we're going to have some representatives. I don't know. I think IGN is going to be there too. And so please reach out to us if you have any questions. If you're considering membership or anything like that, there's information on our website where you can reach out to any of the officers. I'm the resource officer for IGDN currently too. And you can reach out to me with any questions. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.